Okay, it's been a few weeks since we had our last podcast, the New Zealand Aviation podcast, and that was to give Martin an opportunity to truck over to the other side of the world and get things done from where he joins us now. I think you're in Germany, is that correct, Martin?
Yep, in Germany, in Nuremberg.
Oh, wow. Okay, and what are you doing there?
Working. Got a contract with a local company.
Oh, nice. Good to be back there?
Yeah, it's been a while. I kind of know why I left now.
Yeah, how is Germany? Because with everything that's happening with the EU and Angela Merkel, who can't stop shaking in public and all those things, I mean, what's the big deal in Germany right now?
Oh, it's trucking along fine. It's big, it's resilient, it's robust. People are just getting on with it. It's busy. A lot of stuff happening in terms of, they're worried about the economy. It seems to be coming off the boil a bit. They probably have every right to be worried, given that a large part of their economy is based on cars, gasoline cars. And although no one's shouting about it, there's a lot of muttering going on in the background about how electric cars are actually scaring the crap out of them because apart from VW, they're kind of not there for it. BMW is certainly not there for it, and that could be a problem. They're very surprised. Some of the guys I know work in that sort of area, and they're saying, "Oh, geez, Tesla has actually really frightened them. No one thought that many people would buy that many Teslas that readily." Wow.
Actually, you make a good point, because even here in Auckland, where I am, every day I'm seeing Teslas now. Every day.
Yeah, it's amazing. You think they're selling 30,000 vehicles a month now.
I'm surprised that the Germans, with their history in motor vehicle manufacturing, in fact, are part of, the real, at the core of it, really. They invented the Beetle, which just went out of production a few weeks ago, I see, finally. But to be caught like that is I'm surprised.
Well, VW has not been. VW quite famously, I think it was late last year, woke up to the fact that it's a major threat, and they tried to form an industry association, and some of the other big companies, BMW and Mercedes, kind of pushed back. BMW particularly pushed back, and VW said, well, you're either in the industry association or we're going without you because we can't afford to wait around. And then Mercedes jumped on board with VW, and this is about standardizing charging standards and voltages and all this type of thing. And now BMW slowly sort of admitted that they've basically squandered the small. They didn't really have a lead, but they were quite advanced in alternative powertrains and in electrical cars or electric cars up to a few years ago, and they basically just gave it away, head in the sand, And it's also the government. If everyone switched to electric cars, which is unlikely to happen quickly, but if more and more people switch to electric cars, you've got to remember that Germany's taking, for example, Germany, but all countries are the same, 20% of the price of fuel after all the not necessarily taxes, but after all the revenues being, they have what's it called, like excise duty and this and that on a litre of petrol. So here you're paying €1.40, so $2, $2.10, $2.20 for a litre of gas, and 60-70% of that's going to the government in some form of tax or an excise or whatever. An electric car, they get none of that. Also, it doesn't take many people to build an electric car. You don't need people making cylinder heads and gearboxes and all this type of nonsense. It's relatively low intensity production, highly automated production, and of course, the car industry in Germany employs an awful lot of people.
Oh dear.
An awful lot of people.
Yeah, that's a tough one. The scenario you're talking about, the revenue that goes to government from the internal combustion engine sort of based transportation system, that's an issue in New Zealand. In fact, that's an issue all around the place. A good deal of revenue to support a lot of the roading in the country is generated through taking, a good percentage of a litre of gas goes to the government. How do you replace that? You'd have to start putting in other charges or trying to maybe have a toll system on roads or something.
Well, it's like the perfect storm, and it's a real worry. So the electric vehicle thing is on the rise, but so is solar power and generating your own, at least some of your own electricity.
The whole energy
this
system.
is cutting off all these revenue streams, and you've also got governments now in the sort of this dangerous corner. They painted themselves into a corner. Oh yeah, we really love the environment, but we actually love petrol more because we make most of our money off it.
That's right. Well, that's probably why tobacco is still around and legal because of after you've paid for the hospital bills, there's still a lot less left over in tax that goes into the coffers.
Well, yeah, as that Japanese health minister said, we should actually be encouraged smoking because men work their whole lives, retire at 65, and if they're smokers, they're generally dead by 70, so they've only had 5 years of pension.
Yeah, it's like a governor on the system. Anyway, okay. What about aviation?
One quick thing. A packet of cigarettes here is only like $11.
Yeah. Well, you're not taking.
So you can go get a packet of cigarettes and a 6-pack of beers for 15 New Zealand dollars. Packet of cigarettes and a 6-pack of beer.
So you're not taking food off the table of kids so the parents can have their tobacco addiction like happens here. Wow, that's interesting. Okay, so what sort of aviation have you experienced while you've been there? I've noticed a few interesting Northern Hemisphere stories, particularly I think a lot of people have been following the delivery of the first BA A350-1000, looking pretty cool. What else have you been seeing, and what have you flown on anything exotic?
I haven't flown on anything exotic, and I think the fact that I haven't flown on anything exotic brings home a very interesting point for me and a very painful point for would-be premium airlines or airlines that think they can charge a lot because of who they are. I flew Air New Zealand to Japan to get here. I flew Air New Zealand to Japan, did a stopover in Japan because it's just a nice place to do a stopover. And as usual, I took the cheapest, well, not the cheapest flight I could get, but a cheapish flight. Based upon, I wanted to fly a part of the way with Air New Zealand simply so I could go and get a free beer for $200 because that's effectively what it cost me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're lucky.
So I flew 787 to Tokyo, and also it is nice doing a stopover in Tokyo because you're forced to do a stopover because it's a day flight there, and then the flight onto Europe then also a day flight, which is just more comfortable for me. Right. I could have gone cheaper, but it would have meant night flights, and this was the cheapest day flight I could get. So, So I flew Air New Zealand into Tokyo, spent 2 nights in Tokyo, then flew, and this is bizarre, although I booked it on the Air New Zealand flight, it was a British Airways flight to Heathrow. Right.
Oh.
And this was promoted ahead of, well, this is what I don't get about the Air New Zealand side. They're in Star Alliance, but they will, I don't know what sort settings I've got or whatever. They didn't appear to be sorted in any way that I could work out. But they tend to put non-Star Alliance partners ahead of Star Alliance partners. So the Singapore Airlines flight was pretty cheap, but it was way down the bottom of the list. There were more expensive flights ahead of mine. But there was a Cathay Pacific flight and a British Airways flight were ahead of Star Alliance and ahead of even some Air New Zealand options, which I just find a bit odd. Obviously, I don't understand the algorithm, but looking at it, I'm not sure that there is an algorithm. But anyway, so nice cheap flight. Got on the British Airways 787 in Narita, flew over Russia during the day, which was awesome. And, for 8 hours, you're looking out of the window down at the steppes of northern Russia, and there's absolutely nothing.
Wow.
Absolutely nothing.
Can imagine.
It's incredible. But I couldn't tell the difference. Air New Zealand or British Airways. And everyone, jumps around, British Airways economy is so bad, so this, so that. And actually, I could really not tell the difference. The color scheme was slightly different. The plane was exactly the same. And get this, British Airways is in a completely different alliance, but they obviously buy their movie packages from the same supplier because they were all the same. There was a little bit more English content, British, sort of some British comedy series and some British TV shows, but the feature films are all exactly the same. And I just thought, it's really hard. How do you differentiate yourself in a market, or how do you actually have the guts to charge more when if you sit in an economy, there's no difference. There's literally no difference. I thought that was very interesting.
All right, and what are you seeing at the airports? The mix between Airbus and Boeing. I always like to try and sort of get my head around that.
So obviously Heathrow is a lot of Boeing still. You still got Air Canada and those guys flying 767s into Heathrow, you just don't see 767s down our part of the world anymore at all, really. Japan had a few 767s, lots of Boeings. Narita is quite a Boeing heavy airport, although that will change as the Japanese airlines get their A350s, this and that. I saw the ANA Whale A380 on the ramp. That looks awesome. The local airport here in Nuremberg, it's a small regional airport, well, relatively small. It's probably has a lot of planes going in. A lot of 737s from the charter airlines and Ryanair doing Turkey, lots of that. And then you've got EasyJet and all those guys flying their A320s.
Right.
A bigger mix. Yeah, I mean, Heathrow is 50-50 at least, if not heavier towards Boeing, because just so many 777s going into Heathrow. But there are a lot of A330s, A350s. It's interesting. But Heathrow is particularly interesting because you are still seeing 767s being operated by mainline carriers that don't even have the winglets. They haven't spent much money on them. But I guess for 6, 7, 8 hour trips across the Atlantic, maybe it doesn't make that much difference.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, for the cost of them and
loads of A321s. I mean, just loads of A321s. That is becoming very obvious.
All right, and just speaking of orders, I see that you might have seen it today. I think it came out that Air France are in for 60 A220s, maybe.
Yes.
And notice that that's no Boeing in sight there, and that's to, I think, clean up and replace the bottom end A318 and 19. I think that they have in the fleet that are coming up due for replacement. So that's again another big win for the A220. What I was thinking though, and we'll get on to the MAX, if that MAX program stalls, wouldn't Airbus be in an incredibly strong position to swing in the A220 and almost be able to offer just like Boeing was able to offer, deliveries in a reasonable time frame, replacing those airlines who might pull out of MAX orders, again driving another nail into the coffin of the 737. I saw a TV piece on the local TV station in Seattle. It was a piece that had been put up to the internet, and they were actually doing a story on the possibility now of Boeing ceasing for a while 737 production at Renton and the economic fallout that could cause, because we predicted this, there's no more room to put the planes.
Yes, I've heard about that. That to me sounds like a bit of a beat up. And also, it sounds like Boeing trying to put a bit of pressure on the powers that be to get this thing restarted, to put more resource into getting the plane off the ground, because that if you're a pork barrel politician, the last thing you want to hear is that they're going to be closing the local aircraft factory. But
well, I don't think it was
apparently a very real possibility.
It wasn't closing it for good. It was to hold production for a period of time because there just wasn't room for the stuff coming off the line. But if you were Airbus, wouldn't you be going now to all the MAX customers and say, look, forget the MAX, forget it. Go with A220. You don't have to ramp up production of the A320 line to try and fight this. You've got a whole separate line, which surely has unit production growth still potential in it. This could be a real threat. It
does. The A220 line, they'd have to build an extra line because, interestingly enough, I looked this up this morning and I was quite surprised to see the A220 has 526 outstanding orders. So it's got 597 total orders, and they're increasing month by month. They've only delivered 71 as of today. So they've got 526 planes to build still. So the only way they're going to add capacity is by building an extra line, which they could do, but it would take a year or two. But, you do raise an interesting point. There was some other talk, some other commentators were saying, well, maybe Mitsubishi should go and buy the Irkut, that MC-21 line from Russia, and get that ramped up. But that's unlikely to happen.
It might be hard to sell that aircraft type into, not because it is unsafe or can't operate in the Western environment, but you could, if you're an airline competing with an airline with that aircraft, you could sort of put that across as inferior equipment. There is a vulnerability
also,
there.
There's certainly no guarantee that
support.
Mitsubishi would be able to provide the worldwide support and everything that plane would need. So you got the if you look at it now, the way the market's splitting, so the MAX has got a huge problem. Southwest have put they basically said they're not going to be flying that thing till the new year. They're cancelling routes that they were going to be flying because they were expecting new MAXs to enter the network. This is now not happening. They're closing down existing routes because they don't have the capacity. They're not opening the new ones. So it's all getting quite nasty quite quickly, and they're all going to go to Boeing and ask for money on this. You've got the way the market seems to be splitting is Airbus. It looks like Airbus are going to be concentrating on the A220, 100 and 300 to cover the A318 and A319, which it covers beautifully. It would also cover the 737 MAX completely.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So Southwest Airlines has got to be thinking about it, because they don't want to be in this position again where they're cut off from new planes, right? They sooner or later, somebody at Southwest, whether it's the current guy or the next guy, is going to say, "We're so big, we're going to have 400 of these and 400 of those." It makes no difference. Right?
Yep. Yeah. Carry on. Yeah.
So you got the market split with Airbus is going to be A220 at the bottom range, A321 at the top range. They'll probably continue with the A320 Neo and put off developing the CS or the A220-500 for a while. But sooner or later, I would expect that the A320 product line to split between A220 all the way up to the bottom of the A321 range, and A321 going A321, 322, and 323, something like that.
Yeah.
You're going to have a huge range of large single aisle, and Bombardier or the ex-Bombardier is going to take care of the lower range of the single aisle, up to, say, the 180, 200-seater, which the 500 would do.
And Boeing had the opportunity to buy it.
And Boeing had the opportunity to buy it. Now, Boeing, in order to counter that, right, they're going to have to abandon the MAX. The MAX has done its dash now, right? I think we can agree on that. They can sell what they've sold, but that's basically it. So they're going to have to develop the NMA, that new mid-market aircraft. But they've also got a problem with the Embraer, because the A220-100 covers the Embraer 195 perfectly. The Embraer 195 version 2 doesn't really get a lot bigger. So Boeing, they've got a hole. Embraer will cover the bottom of the market, up to sort of the 737 MAX maybe with an Embraer, but not quite. And then what are they going to fill? What's going to fill the A319 to A321 space? Certainly not this new NMA aircraft, because that's meant to compete with the A321s in the bottom of the A330 range, right? So that's a much bigger plane, and so potentially they've got a huge gap, which the MAX would have filled. But I personally think the MAX has probably done its dash. There's enough bad press coming out of there. Even engineers from the line saying, "Well, my family won't fly in it."
Yes, I've seen an interview with somebody saying that, and also wasn't there that picture of a Ryanair MAX that had been renamed?
Yeah, 8200, 737-8200. Yeah. I don't know whether that was real, but apparently somebody took a photo of that. Yeah.
The thing is, you could probably argue quite safely, that branding is buried. In fact, 737 now even just that may be an issue.
I think more to the point, it's 737. I don't think people really look behind the name a lot. Yeah, no. Exactly. So 737, I don't want to fly on a 737. You're safe at that. If somebody says that, they don't have to think, oh, well, I don't mind if I'm flying on an 800. That's all right. But is it an 8? No, they won't care. They just say, I'm not going to fly on a 737.
So if you were an airline that didn't have a Boeing narrow-body fleet, you might say, you might reinforce in all your marketing, all Airbus fleet or something like that to just nudge, wink, wink the difference. Yeah,
which all comes down to another interesting story that some guys in the States are saying, well, Boeing's going to demand a bailout for this.
What? Because they're going to try and rope the FAA in as having some sort of responsibility, some sort of culpability in the situation developing.
The story is very interesting. It all goes back to the reverse takeover of McDonnell Douglas taking over Boeing, the backwards takeover, and then Boeing turning into a financial services company and extracting so much cost out of the engineering and production parts, blah, blah, blah. It all comes to this, and then they're going to turn around to the government and say, well, this stuff, give us $5 billion or give us $25 billion to help us recapitalize and get out of this. And there's a great thing I read, and I actually marked it and copied it because I thought this is a brilliant quote. And this is from the CEO of Boeing, and I call it the bullshit quote of the day. And it says, Boeing says, it follows a balanced cash deployment strategy that ensures investment in our core businesses and workforce, returns values to shareholders, and maintains our strong balance sheet and credit rating. Does not mention anything about airplanes.
Yeah, no, and we want to make the best planes around. Nothing mentioned there.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Okay, well, the trouble, I can't see this trouble going away for a while. I see Lehman is saying he's got an article July 24th. Boeing's second quarter earnings down, 777X delay confirmed, but that seems to be related to the certification of the GE 90 variation engine or whatever the new engine is. But here's the figure that he's put for first half revenue for Boeing, down. This is a huge figure, $9 billion versus last year. Yeah. And that is the impact of that 737 MAX grounding. Air Canada is paying for all their MAX pilots and no one's flying, right? So that's not happening. It looks like the FAA have come out and said that, and I'll just find the headline here, that it says here that engineers at the Federal Aviation Administration, this is a story from the New York Times, came to a troubling realization in the days after the first MAX crash, that was the Indonesian crash. They didn't fully understand the automated system that helped send the plane into a nosedive. The engineers at the FAA didn't understand it. I mean...
Well, yeah. I mean, the story I read about that well, apparently the initial meetings after the shutdown, when Boeing went to explain what they thought the problem was, were even worse than that, because the FAA engineers are like, it's not that they didn't understand it. They didn't even know those changes had been made.
Yeah.
So they couldn't understand it. They did not know that they'd made those rate changes to the MCAS.
Well, it says
it wasn't written down anywhere.
It says
in the documentation that had been submitted to them.
Yeah, Boeing did not submit a formal review of the MCAS system after, I think, the initial overhaul of it, which was designed, I think, to give it more of more response, basically. It says here
more force. They put more force into it. Yeah. In
the Lehman article, it wasn't. In the New York Times article, that they weren't even required to submit that by FAA's own rules,
which had been very helpfully rewritten and changed to support the aircraft industry, which was the whole point of deregulating FAA oversight, because Boeing and not just Boeing, the other aircraft manufacturers had managed to convince the government that the FAA was slowing things down, and if they didn't help them speed it up, Airbus would eat their lunch. And
it says an engineering test pilot at the regulator knew about the changes, that is to make the put more force into that MCAS system, according to an agency official. But his job, and this is the silo mentality at work, his job was to evaluate the way the plane flew, not to determine the safety of the system. So everything's fallen through the gaps here. It's incredible when you
and it's also having a knock-on effect, because Liam News, which for those of you out there that haven't ever visited the site, it's actually really interesting. Well, it's not just actually, it really is interesting. He has another good article saying our issues with the MAX covering up other issues at Boeing, because if you look at the production schedule, the production and versus sales figures for the 787. The 787 line is booked out to 2021. But by 2022, less than 50% of the production is sold, and by sort of 2026, 2027, none of the production is sold. So they're producing 168 planes a year. Sales for the last year, even before this MAX issue, sales of 787 sales for the last year have not been increasing. So they've been slowly declining. So, you hope Boeing doesn't take their eye off the ball too much, because they've got to potentially either got to slow down 787 sales just as they come out of the curve of paying for all of the development and the delays and everything, right? Or, they've got another problem cooking. And then now you've got the delays on the 777, which I can't imagine are helping them in campaigns they're doing with Qantas at the moment, because Qantas is just about to announce its Project Sunrise. Now, Boeing might have stepped up and say, listen, this plane hasn't flown yet, but we'll sell it to you and we'll guarantee any performance shortfalls it might have. Or Qantas might say, well, the A350 is actually basically doing it now. We want to make the safe choice. We're going to have to go with the A350. In fact, at the moment, it's not even a contest because one is a plane which exists and needs a few tweaks, and the other one doesn't really exist yet.
Yeah.
The Boeing product hasn't flown.
And you would say, and along with that, how do we know that there's not sort of going to be hidden fishhooks that come up like the MAX? Not saying that it'll have a safety problem, but the risk averseness now of the FAA is such that the initial plans for certifying this thing may be unreasonable now. And but yeah, who knows? They're in a hell of a position, aren't they? My God, they're in a hell of a position. From almost every angle, it's difficult. Yeah,
that's why people who are interested in this, they should go and just do a Google search or a DuckDuckGo search, it might find it, called The Coming Boeing Bailout. And I'll put the link in the podcast download thing. He goes into that whole thing about the reverse takeover by McDonnell Douglas and how Boeing has changed from a really, really good engineering company to a really, really good financial services and share trading company.
Well, how was that able to occur? Because usually when a company takes over another company, the company taking over or absorbing that company usually is in charge, or the people who run that part of the company, and they call the shots. This whole reverse takeover thing, how did that happen? It must be bigger than that. There must have been some political will or something in there to effect that, or the people who were in McDonnell Douglas when Boeing took it over were just the smartest people and knew how to completely manipulate the situation and take over the show.
It's exactly a combination of that. So McDonnell Douglas were very savvy, and basically they used Boeing's money to buy them so they could take it over. The personalities at the top there. But also the defense secretary at the time was a massive believer in consolidation. He thought there were too many defense providers in America, and he was apparently very close to the top team at McDonnell Douglas. And he was basically the one who said, "Listen, you guys need to get together." And it was both. It was financial savvy and political will.
Because
that's when Northrop Grumman got together, Lockheed Martin got together. I don't know if you remember, it was in the 90s. All these companies suddenly started getting together, and because it used to be Martin Marietta and Lockheed, and it used to be Northrop and Grumman. They were all separate companies, so they all went together in the 90s, and that's when Boeing and the defense secretary, or the guy working in the government that was planning all of this, his previous job had been a mergers and acquisitions lawyer.
There we go. Yeah, too many lawyers in politics. I wonder also if that would have been at the time when the C-17 was either beginning its production, and that all came out of Long Beach. So someone had to take over that program, didn't they? Otherwise, it probably would have stalled and failed. So that's probably part of it. I don't know. Whatever happened there. Someone should write a book about that, because that's like a reverse order of events, isn't it?
Well, I think there'll be several books coming out about it. And the article that I read, and there's been a few supporting articles, they basically supported that whole idea that this has all come from the McDonnell Douglas management, who treated it as a typical cost-cutting exercise in order to increase shareholder value and give all the management bonuses. Because they think it's a mature product, it's an aeroplane, let's just milk it for as long as we can.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened.
But isn't that why
they won't be the first to do it?
Isn't that why
they weren't the first, they won't be the last.
The MD-11 failed because of that, didn't it? Because of that management. That was a cutting corner exercise. And it wasn't. I mean, it was an acceptable airplane, but it wasn't a good passenger airplane, was it? Because the airlines who bought it initially didn't take long before they sold them off. So, and it didn't meet.
And the DC-9, the MD-95, it was too little, too late.
Yeah,
it was a beautiful plane, great plane, but It was never that popular because all they did is strap new engines onto a 40-year-old plane, or 30-year-old plane.
Put a glass EFIS cockpit in it. All right, well, the reverse takeover of Boeing, that will certainly go down in the history books. I see that Trump's been active. He's, according to a website I'm looking at here, Simple Flying, he's had a meeting with the US airline CEOs and the Middle East carriers. It says here, the meeting came amid a year-long battle between large US carriers and carriers from the Middle East. It says here, unfortunately for the US CEOs, the meeting did not go as planned, and some of the sort of like takeouts, as they say. We've talked about this before. Wasn't it American, United, and Delta were complaining that the M3, Qatar, Etihad, and Emirates had were uncompetitive or anti-competitive in their practices, that they had access to cheap fuel. And
cheap fuel and cheap labour and all of this.
And the whole 9 yards. And also they're operating, of course, big aircraft, A380, so lots of seats. And of course also the that overseas investment bank, I think, structure in the US was funding, weren't they, a lot of purchases for these
cheap loans
aircraft. So it says here, let's just get to the bit here. While the meeting was technically secret, leaks and a report by Josh Liederman of their website can give insights. Simplest terms, the meeting may not have gone to plan. First and foremost, the absence of the Delta chief executive apparently infuriated the US president. You wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of him. And also Trump apparently criticized the American Airlines stock performance. Now, they're seeking, the US 3 are seeking protections against the ME3. And the US president concluded that the US 3's grievance against the ME3 would best be resolved by the Department of Transportation's complaints process. So basically, the American Airlines are not getting any forceful help from Trump.
No.
So I wonder why that is.
Well, because he doesn't think there's any merit to their complaint, perhaps?
Yeah, but isn't he a great, stick up for America?
Yeah,
America first?
Maybe he's more of a stick up, or maybe Dubai and those guys have had a quiet word in his ear and say, mate, don't go too far because you'll cancel those 777 orders.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Aren't they already talking about, especially Emirates, shuffling that order and dropping a number of the 777s going to 787?
Yeah. Maybe they say, listen, mate, we don't have to go to 787. We can go to A330 if we wanted.
How much trading, I wonder, do those Emirates, the M3 countries or states? I wonder how much trade they do with the US. I mean, do they buy weapons from them and things like that? It's quite possible they do.
Yeah, they do, but I think Emirates is going to take 98 777s or something eventually.
Yeah.
That's they've ordered 115 777-9s and 35 777-8s. Now let's say they're getting them for, that's $25 billion. That's probably, with engines and everything, that's probably about $35-40 billion worth of aircraft just in the buying of them. Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, you don't want to.
So American Airlines is an important thing, but they're just getting bailed out all the time. So you'd rather go with the guys that are making you money, which is Boeing. In this case,
so it's all about the orders. So what's happened is the M3 countries have said, look, if we've got problems here, if you're not going to be the open skies place that you said you were going to be, and that's why we went out and bought all these planes, then we're not going to buy from you anymore. That's basically the deal. And if these guys keep complaining, the more we're not going to do that. And I mean, if you were Trump, what would you support? Who would you support?
That's the thing, eh?
Yeah. Anyway, interesting because that's been festering for quite a while, hasn't
it? Yeah, and it is amazing how many planes Emirates does have on order. I mean, they've got 40 A330s on order, right?
Yeah.
A330-900 Neos. They've got 30 A350-900s coming on. 35 777-8s. They've still got 11 A380s to go. There's 115 777-9s. So, if they convert the 777-9s and say, no, we want to go to a 1.5 for 1 or a 2 for 1 split back to 787s, and if you give us too much chop, we'll go to A330-900s because we've already ordered 40 of them.
Yeah,
that's a pretty big threat, and you wouldn't have to make that public. Just keep it quiet, and it'll scare them.
And that might go for Qatar and Etihad and anyone else.
Exactly.
Fly Dubai. Yeah. Okay. Speaking of 787s, a little bit of a segue here. We're back into Australia, and I see that Australia are launching, or Qantas are launching, Chicago flights from Brisbane next year. Yeah.
So they must be with their 787-9s, eh?
Yeah. So do you think because Air New Zealand are flying that route that they're doing that?
I reckon.
Yeah. Because that's one way to get to Chicago. You could just hop across the Tasman on Air New Zealand and then go to Chicago through Auckland and lose business. Yeah.
Yeah.
That 787-9 is quite an effective aircraft, though, for those long haul flights, isn't it?
It is. I was surprised, though, on that British Air. I mean, it obviously makes sense. It must pay money. But that British Airways one I went on doesn't have many seats in it. I forget what it was, but it's like 210 or 220 or something. Really, not many.
Right.
For the long haul, because they've got a couple of configurations, and I mean that was a long flight. It was 11 hours, so it's not a huge plane. But yeah, I was quite surprised at how few seats it has in it.
I'm going to Brazil on the 11th of August for a week, and I'm going on a LATAM 787-9.
That'd be nice, eh?
Yeah, well, I think it's 11 or 12-hour flight, so to Santiago. Would that be about right? I think it is. And then to Sao Paulo from there. In fact, flying LATAM the whole.
What's the connector on?
Connector is on LATAM as well. So go.
What type of airplane?
Oh, I think it's an A320. Yeah, A320. Okay. A320 from Chile, Santiago to Sao Paulo, and then up to Manaus again, LATAM A320. And yeah. Cool. So that should be cool. I'll be interested to be the first time I've flown on a 787, Martin. Can you believe it?
It'll be, well, get ready. It's tight.
Back here I'm getting ready for that. Back here in New Zealand, and Air New Zealand looks like they're about to turf out some, what they're saying is non-customer facing roles, and that is
pilots.
Yeah, that's right. They could qualify for that. People in head office, basically. Apparently redundancies coming up. And consultants are coming in, or have been in. American consultancy company has gone through the airline and has been sort of identifying positions that can be eliminated. So Luxon was pretty serious about lowering the overheads.
So how many people are they looking at?
2,000 positions. Christopher Luxon is now showing up with a 1% rating as preferred Prime Minister.
That didn't take long, did it?
1%. Yeah.
Wow.
Just talking about Air France before, 60 A320s, and they're talking about getting rid of the A380 2022. I still can't understand why that didn't work. I
can't understand why they never put the full amount of seats into the damn thing.
I just don't get it. No one ever did that.
No one ever did it. No. Yeah, I just don't understand why.
Very odd, isn't it?
That A220 that Air France KLM have taken. I've been reading quite a lot about that, and there's some quite interesting things about that plane. First of all, Delta's now doing transcons with it, right? Atlanta to Seattle.
Yeah.
With the A220, and they're doing with the small one, the 130-seater.
Yeah.
Right. It's a 4-hour flight, and you think, oh, that's quite long. But then you see Air Baltics doing the Baltics from where they fly out of Latvia or whichever it is to Dubai, which is 7-hour scheduled flight in that plane. So they're exercising the full 3,000 miles, 3,500 mile range on that plane. And then there's another very interesting story that I was reading about Lufthansa was saying, because they own Swiss Air and Austrian Airlines and all this, they were saying they were facing a lot of competition in the Geneva market from Ryanair and EasyJet and they were operating out of Geneva using A320s, and they needed to cut costs, and they didn't want to buy A318s or A319s because they doesn't cut enough cost. So they put the A220 in there, and they're saying they've got a seat cost in the A220. They said it's roughly the same as a A320, but you can fly that plane with 50 people in it and still make money. Whereas with an A320 with us, that's the thing. And also it's 6 tons lighter than an A318, and it's 8 tons lighter than the smallest Boeing.
Yeah.
So your landing fees, everything, your wear on your tires, your maintenance, everything's lower. And the Lufthansa revenue guy was saying, no, since we put the A220 into Geneva, we're actually making money.
Just while we've been talking, I see this article's come in literally in the last 40 minutes from I think it's a French site called RFI. The world and its voices, and it says here, just speaking about the upside for Airbus in this MAX situation, it says here, European aerospace giant Airbus more than doubled its profit in the first half of the year, which is attributed to increased production of the A320, the rival to the 737 MAX, which was grounded. Profits reached 1.197 billion euros. That's up from 496 million euros in the same 6-month period of 2018. And they're saying it's driven by the ramp-up in production of the A320 and the transition to the more efficient Neo. So, you know, that's a huge increase over last year. Oh, my God.
It is a huge increase.
They're quietly really benefiting from this, aren't they?
Well, they're going to try and ramp up production, but you know, the reason that Airbus really can't make a lot of hay out of this, and they'll do what they can. They'll try and increase deliveries and all this type of thing. But I'm sure the planes will slowly be commanding a premium. You know, and you don't be surprised to see operators with large orders selling some of their orders to other people, sort of a bit of horse trading going on in the background. But there's no alternatives, right? It's Airbus or Boeing, and Airbus is pretty much flat out. And you'll find that the current MAX users, the reason you haven't seen, I think, the reason, and there hasn't been a whole lot of cancellations and protests and all this type of thing, is because the MAX users are probably waiting to see what type of deal Boeing's going to cut them, or they're just biding their time because apparently when a plane's been grounded for a year, all bets are off. And you can't. It's not only that you can probably cancel for free, but you can also get damages. So just don't say anything until the year's up, and then sue them.
Yeah, and they must be anticipating that, Boeing.
And if you look at the market mix, it hasn't really changed. Max demand, such as it is okay. It's not happening, but that Airbus demand hasn't really increased because Airbus really can't increase over a couple of percentage points. They can't really increase the amount of planes they deliver, and the Airbus-Boeing split, or the Boeing-Airbus split, it's 39% of the market versus 55%. So Airbus was already in the narrow-body market well ahead, and there's a few percent going to Kut and the Chinese guys. So if you take the ex-Bombardier and Embraer into the whole mix, Boeing has got 39% of the market, and Airbus has got 55% of the market. That's quite a big difference. That is bigger than I thought.
Yeah.
I always thought it was around, sort of 48, 52, that sort of thing. But it's quite Boeing. But this is it's just going to be harrowing for the financial controllers, because of course that's what it's all about, right? I mean, the engineers, you just feel sorry for them, because you read report after report after report where they said, well, we shouldn't be building this thing, it's too old.
Yeah. Michael O'Leary, who's always, he speaks his mind, doesn't he, usually? He said he cannot rule out making some of Ryanair's 17,500 staff redundant if the MAX stays grounded for longer than expected. And he was speaking at their first quarter profits, speaking as the low-cost airline's first quarter profits slumped by 24%. The carrier's chief executive bemoaned the impact, and they have 135 MAXs on order. 58 due by the summer of 2020. That's only next year. So now if he gets grumpy, he might. That's the sort of guy who could really change his mind.
Yeah, and you just got to also think what it's going to mean for sole sourcing into the future. You know, is our airlines going to rethink their whole strategy, or ask Boeing and Airbus to revisit their strategies of saying, Airbus, we'd really like a choice on the A350. We don't just want Rolls-Royce engines. We don't have a problem with Rolls-Royce engines at the moment, but maybe you should give us a choice. And 777, same with the GE. Max, is Southwest Airlines, these airlines that fly one aircraft type, I mean, they've got to be rethinking, right? Well, I guess the same goes for Airbus. There's airlines out there that only fly Airbus. But what choices do they have?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so I've been keeping an eye on space things as well, and I noticed that SpaceX's Starhopper completes its first free flight. Pretty difficult to see what was going on, because it was at night and there's a lot of smoke and stuff. But man, he doesn't stop, does he?
No, he doesn't mess around, does he? Yeah.
And he's talking something on the moon in 2021.
Yeah,
it's not far away.
An unmanned version of the Starship. Yeah.
So
that Starhopper looks like something I built, hey?
Yeah, well, it doesn't look like it looks like it's a prop.
Yeah, it looks rubbish. Yeah.
Yeah. So how's that going to work? Do we know how that's going to work? Is it just going to? Let's see. What does he say here?
Starhopper.
Yeah. The test.
Yeah, that's just going to. I think the highest that's going to go 6.5 kilometers. That's as high that thing is ever meant to go, and might not even do that. But I think initially they were talking of 20,000 feet or something for its.
Well, they flew it to 20 meters in the test flight, so that's just going to be used to get around the moon.
No, that's not going to be used at all. That's just going to be used to test the engine. That's all that's doing is testing the engine,
I gotcha.
And the gimbaling system and all that type of thing. So they're going to certify the engine using that. Well, try and certify the engine, and then they're going to build a real one, which is 10 times higher. And that really is just a prop. It's like a flying bedstead.
Okay, well, I got the right impression then. I should have dug a bit deeper there. But he seems to be the future. He's the future. He's the one who's right out in front, right? He's going to be the. Yeah.
I watched the last mission go up last week. I forget what day it was, but I stayed up and watched it. And I think it was the third time the capsule on top had been to the space station, and it was the third time the booster had been used to deliver something in orbit. And there's these great composite shots where they've taken the 4 cameras capturing the landing, close up, one on the vehicle and one at the landing pad. And they've stitched them all together, timed them all perfectly, so you can watch this composite image of this thing hurtles out of space, and you get the double sonic boom as it decelerates through the sound barrier and all this type of thing. And I think every other rocket engineer looks at that and just says, you know what, we might as well give up, because we've been farting around for 50 years.
Exactly.
And, how come this guy started 15 years ago and has got to where we should have been at least a couple of years ahead of him? And, you can say, obviously you couldn't have done it 50 years ago. You couldn't have done it 20 years ago. But how come this guy starts from basically from nowhere and is still the only person doing it? And, there's all these competitors coming up, Jeff Bezos with Amazon and the new Glenn, and it's all awesome and all of this. But he hasn't done it yet.
No.
And people tend to forget this. Oh, wait until Amazon's flying. Well, we'd love to, but he hasn't yet. And it's the same thing with the Tesla cars. Say what you like, and this is even what the other car manufacturers are saying. They're saying he's got like a 5 to 10 year lead on us. So we're, like VW is starting to push out electric cars, but they say, well, we're not going to be as good as Tesla.
Yeah,
we know it. We know it already. That's a scary place to be if you're a major player, right?
Well, it just shows you just don't give up, right? You just hang in there. You're going to have to be able to convince other people, because they're going to want to invest in it and have the buy-in that makes it happen. But he obviously is the personality who can do that.
Yeah. He just seems to be able to do it. And to say what people say, oh well, he's boardroom coups, but he's just driven, and if you're not driven like him, he just seems to get rid of you.
Yeah,
and that's not very nice, but it's you get stuff done.
Yeah, well, boy, do you get stuff done on multiple fronts, not just one thing, multiple things. It's
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how he has enough hours in the day. It's incredible. I don't know if you caught up with this story, Martin, since you've been away, but the Prime Minister had to fly back on a commercial flight from Australia last week because the 757's, one of their flight computers broke down. It seems that the RNZAF is having problems deploying aircraft to any level of reliability now. There was a moment maybe a month ago where none of the C-130s were serviceable. They were all on the ground. We could have had a disaster. Anything could have happened. We wouldn't have had any aircraft. And it got me thinking, the aircraft like the 757 where there's VIP and stuff like that, isn't it better just to order a couple of those Airbus, what do they call them, MRTs or whatever, and the Aussies are flying them, and just get Air New Zealand and Qantas to keep them in trim and do it that way rather than actually operate your own aircraft. It seems that they're not capable of keeping them flying to any level of reliability.
Well, we spoke about this on a show years ago, I think. Didn't we call it the Anzac Squadron or the Tasman Squadron?
Exactly.
And that would have been, I think we were saying some A320s at that time. We were saying, and some big helicopters. So both countries probably aren't big enough each to support a squadron of really large transport helicopters, or Australia might be, but New Zealand certainly not. So why doesn't New Zealand say, well, Australia, if you're going to go and buy 25 Chinooks, let us buy 3 of them, and we'll operate some of them jointly.
Yeah. And
the same thing goes for the tanker or the liaison aircraft. Go and buy 3 A320s, and we'll buy 1 of them.
Well, no, you want something. The great thing about those A330s that the Aussies have got, the British have got, and I think the Singaporeans have got it now, is that they've got the big cargo door. You can actually shift stuff in them, right? I mean, they're actually useful. Those narrow body sort of package freighter arrangement that we've got, that's not useful. You can't do stuff with that,
I mean, and you can pick up an old A330-200 for a song, I reckon.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just think it's not good for a nation to not be able to deploy. Those, particularly the transport aircraft, are incredibly useful in disasters. And you saw what happened in Christchurch. Imagine if you couldn't support moving any equipment by air to anywhere in the country because none of them could fly. I mean, how would that look? How would that be?
Yeah, it wouldn't be a good look, would it?
It's shameful. It really is.
You have to go and borrow a C-17 off the Aussies.
Yeah, please send one over, please.
And they'd never let us forget it either.
No, yeah, exactly. They'd be wanting to deport even more dysfunctional Kiwis back home. Anyway,
yeah.
All right. So, quick update if we're through everything. I mean, really, There's only one story that's dominating world aviation on a daily, weekly basis, and that is the MAX story. Just can't get away from it. That is.
Unfortunately,
that is the story, and it's kind of like a stuck record, but it is what it is. I'll bring our birds home, off to Brazil on the 11th of August, in Manaus on the 13th and 14th, and maybe the 15th of August, Martin. Hoping to go to Brasilia, but tricky getting some meeting times locked in there, but we're still trying. Got a bit of wiggle room for that, but be going up and meeting the management of Manaus Airport. Infraero is the state-owned enterprise that owns that airport. Meeting with them. I've got a gift to take to them. We're going to get with the aircraft. We're allowed access to it. We're going to film it. I'm taking a drone, and I'm going to film the airframe with the drone. It's going to be fantastic to find out what's inside that thing. It's been sitting out in the weather since late 2004. That's a long time. So that'll be good. I think what will happen is the management of the airport will know once and for all that this is serious. They would have met the people. I would have told them that, you clear this legal issue for us to buy it. The donations will come in. We can do that. So it's something that has to happen. And also it kicks off the opportunity we have to have a TV series made about us by the production company that makes the Plane Resurrection series, though not to be included in that series. They're talking about something else. So that initial filming will, be the start of that. And I'm hoping that we can, get a lot of energy and enthusiasm injected into the campaign back here from sending out those pictures and coming back and doing media. We've got some TV opportunities. An indication of the level of interest is I put up an update video on the Bring Our Birds Home social media pages just in the last 24 hours or so, relating to the time we're recording this, and already nearly 2,000 views. And that's pretty spectacular. Obviously, we've got some pretty good knowledge of video views over the 2.5 years we've been doing this thing, and that's one of the best performing. So I can just see that there's a lot of interest, and nothing ventured, nothing gained. I've had my tropical illness and disease shots over the last few days, so all good to go. And it's going to be fascinating to see that aircraft again face to face. I'm wondering how I'll feel when I see it. And I'm sure that a lot of our followers will enjoy seeing the pictures. So not too long to go now.
That'll be great.
That'll be great.
3 weeks and you're there.
Yeah, exactly. And next podcast probably, or within the next two, I can describe that and we can talk about that. So that's a great development, and I think that that will be the catalyst for generating the interest and support that will then help in securing the other airframes. So it's going to be good. At last. It's taken a long time to get to this.
It's going to be good. It's also going to be pretty hot, I reckon.
I am told it is one of the most humid cities on the planet, Manaus.
Yeah.
After being with the travel doctor today and getting a full briefing on what you can get if you're not immune to all this stuff, it's you've got to be quite vigilant. I've haven't done the tropics like this before, so I've got the bag with the good repellent and the anti-nausea and the anti-diarrhea and the rehydration packs and everything. So good to go.
I tell you, it's not the maximum temperatures that get you. It's the fact that the minimum temperature is so close to the maximum. That's what it just doesn't cool down. It'll be 25 degrees at midnight.
We're in an air-conditioned hotel, so that should be okay. It's just a matter of keeping the insect repellent on, and they suggested a light, long-sleeve shirt.
Yeah. Okay.
So there you go. I'll follow.
I wish I'd been air-conditioned during the. We had that heat wave here last week. Jeez, it was hot.
Really? So what did it get to?
39, 40, but because you got 16 hours of daylight, the hottest part of the day was at sort of 6:37 in the evening, and it just never cooled down. It was 25 degrees at midnight.
Yeah. What are they saying about old Boris Johnson being the Prime Minister? There's a question for you, given you're in that part of the world and it's just happened.
Well, I read a very interesting article, and maybe we shouldn't touch on politics and all this, but there were a lot of complaints in the left that his cabinet was very diverse, but it wasn't the right type of diversity because no one likes members of minorities who are right-wing or apparently right-wing, apparently. No. So, but even though it is the most diverse cabinet in history or whatever, I think people are I think people are a bit upset because he might be a nutter, but he's doing very leadership things, and he shouldn't do that. He should have just been a buffoon and completely useless. Yeah. But it looks like he had a plan, and he's come out and doing things, and he's wrong-footed a lot of people.
I saw the speech he gave outside Number 10 as he just after he came back from visiting the Queen, and that was one of the most uplifting. Well, maybe you don't have to work that hard to be that uplifting, but the speeches and the sort of tone that came from the previous leadership, Theresa May. I mean, she was like, the Grim Reaper, the way she spoke, there was nothing to feel hopeful or enthusiastic about. He comes along and he's literally, it sounds like he's lifting people up. So, and I was thinking, listening to that, that's probably what the people want. So, of course, the cynical news media, who do seem to be captured by a particular, I don't know, ideology or political leaning. There does seem to be a bias there. The Remainer people are well represented in the media. They couldn't cope with that. They really didn't know what to make of it. Like you said, they want him to be a buffoon, and perform to type.
But he's like, we've got a plan for it. It might happen. Let's just get on with it and let's make sure we do it well. Come on, guys. And everyone's like, oh, damn.
Yeah, well, it sounds pretty good. Good point, or interesting point you made about depending on your political ideology, what sort of diversity is acceptable or not. I see, there are people in America, people of color, African Americans, if they're conservative, they're actually being labelled racist.
Yeah,
it's crazy time, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Anyway,
it is.
It's entertainment, though, whether you like Trump or Boris Johnson or whoever, I got to say, they're a lot more entertaining than anyone else I can think of.
That's the thing. I've quite, how do you say, not avidly, but if there's an article by Boris Johnson, and he does a column in the Telegraph, which I occasionally get access to, which I always read, because whether I agree with it or not, it's always well written, and it's always, it's not funny. It looks at things with a sense of humor, which is, I find, very important.
I thought one of the good things that he said in that speech I mentioned, also in his first speech to Parliament, by the way, isn't the Speaker of the British Parliament I can't remember his name off the top of my head. What an entertaining guy. He's a real showman. But what he was doing, he was talking up those British virtues of humour, of sort of irony, of sort of kindness.
Self-effacing.
Yeah, self-effacing. And I thought that was kind of a good thing to do.
Yeah, it is. It is. And of course, there's a small village in northeastern Turkey, which is very happy because that's where his great-granddad came from.
Right. There you go. And he's sort of put across as a sort of Churchillian type. I don't think they're trying to make too much of it.
Churchill is his hero.
Yeah.
He's written books about
and he was a journalist. I think he was the editor of the New Statesman, wasn't he? Boris Johnson. So,
yes,
yeah.
And he's worked for a couple of newspapers, so he's one of them. Yeah,
I think it was a European correspondent for one of the big papers. But anyway, that's going to be that's going to add entertainment to the overseas political dramas that we seem to be more interested in than our own local politics, actually. So,
yeah.
Anyway,
I think Anyway, yeah.
All right.
Let's stop there.
All right. Well, okay. The future for Boeing is here's the future for them. They need to create, not only do they need to create a new aircraft, but they need to make it an electric one. Now, that's the game changer if they can do that.
Well, yeah, and it absolutely is, but of course, no one wants to be the first, because whoever makes the first electric plane, it's going to be the worst electric plane.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, no one wants to be first. That's why NASA needs to maybe make the first one. Oh, speaking of NASA, we've had, I was down in Christchurch a few weeks ago, and Sophia 747 SP was down there.
That's cool, eh?
Sitting out on the ramp. I looked up to the history. That's an ex-Pan Am 74 SP, so that goes back to the late 70s and to a real historic airline. Clipper Lindbergh it was, named after Charles Lindbergh. Wow. And, of course, he was the route-proving pilot for a lot of the early international routes, especially when they went into land flying for Pan Am. He was one Tripp's personal guy for that, so... Interesting that link's still around, and I see that they've just left Christchurch yesterday. They're back in the States now.
Okay.
Going via Honolulu. Oh, yeah. Actually, not that huge looking.
No. I mean, dumpy little thing.
Back in the day, because I remember the SPs at Wellington, they're still sizable aircraft, but, those engines don't look so big now with the GE90s around and things like that. They're quite small.
Yeah.
Anyway, but good to see that aircraft sitting there, and and reading about the equipment on board is just incredible, just stunning. So they were here for I think a month, flying out of that area at Operation Deep Freeze Occupy. So there we go. So that's about it. In a world dominated by the MAX problem, I think that's going to be the case for some time to come yet, right? Do you think they'll get flying before the end of the year?
I think the fact that they're signalling that they might possibly not means they're not.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, and how long are you? You've probably told us, but how long are you in Germany for?
Up to 3.5 months.
Okay.
Up to, but we'll see.
You caught up with old friends and rallies?
Well, not really. I'm in the wrong town. So.
Oh, did you catch up with the Big Jet TV guys? They said hi to us. I see through one of the through YouTube. So I was wondering if you connected with them.
No, it didn't in the end.
Oh, well. Yeah, I watched their coverage
Lightning.
of the A350 BA landing, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is very cool. I tracked the flight and watched a bit of it as well. No, it was really good, that.
All right, well, good to hear from you again, and hopefully, or maybe before I go, we can get something out, but afterwards, of course, we'll be back on with another podcast, and I'll sort of do a debrief, and we'll catch up on things. So you've been listening to the NZ Aviation Podcast with Paul Brennan in Auckland and Martin Oakes in
Nuremberg.
Yeah. West. Well, there's no such thing as West or East Germany anymore. It's just Germany, isn't there? In Germany, and where it's what sort of temperature have you had today?
It's about 25.
Okay.
It's clearing up. Had a rain overnight.
Not quite the heat wave.
No, thank God that's gone. Yeah.
All right. Okay, good to hear you again, Martin. We'll talk again soon.
All right, then. See you later.